So Frank Vegans, the Vice President and CIO, University of Texas at Dallas. I felt that Norham's talk hit the mark 100% with what it is we're trying to do here. It focused on the fact that we can't wait to be innovative and creative. It's something that we need to own from the ground up and get that thing started and move it forward. So it was excellent. All the feedback I've gotten so far, including the favor I'm getting ready to ask him, I would point to the fact that he hit a home run.
I'm Brian Doherty. I'm the CTO here at UT Dallas, and really enjoyed Yoram's presentation today. There's a lot of ideas in there that really you can take to heart and think about, and it really helps energize me and think about how I can make my organization work more efficiently.
So Chris Robinette, I'm actually with UT Dallas on staff here, and I thought the talk was great. I thought some of the talking points were outstanding. I thought, especially kind of hitting on trust and how to foster trust in an organization, also foster innovation, were definitely eye-opening from my perspective, and I think some great takeaways.
I'm David Wynn. I'm with Southern Methodist University, and I just got done hearing Dr. Solomon speak. It was a great testament to, again, building trust in an organization, looking at your people, knowing that a policy won't fix everything, and I highly recommend that if you get a chance to listen to him, check him out, check out his books. He's a great speaker.
Okay, my name is Chuck Hazeman. I run my own consulting practice, and the aspect of your trust that you talked about really hit on right on the numbers. And I'm a very lazy person, so I hate to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to get back to you, and I'd like to talk about how I can maybe incorporate some of your thoughts into some of the stuff I do without you come looking for me with a gun.
Howdy, my name is Alejandro Arroyo. I am a rising senior at Texas A&M University for the class of 2019, and I thought the presentation was amazing. I thought it was really cool about how Mr. Solomon was talking about the real building blocks of innovation and creativity, which are extremely important in today's economy and the future, seeing as how all these different technologies and services are going to be putting a premium on people who are innovative and creative.
Okay, my name is Wayne, and I'm for the UTD IT department. And I like your presentation because I have similar ideas, but guide you out, and you got a book written. I like it, and I got your book. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to tell it to my wife. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Just no headshots.
Dr. Yoram Solomon, you want to stand up and wave your hand, just so you know where he's at. There he is. He served in the Israeli Defense Forces 35th Airborne Paratroopers Brigade. It was one of Israel's elite forces, where he learned firsthand the importance of effective leadership and teamwork and how trust develops under fire. And that's more ways than one. He published 8 books so far. Some of them are out there, which I plan to get one. 22 patents, more than 200 articles for Inc. magazine, and was named one of the top 20 innovation bloggers in 2015, 2016, and 2017 by Innovation Excellence. He's currently a professor of entrepreneurship at SMU in Dallas and Hadassah College in Jerusalem, and he used to teach right here at UT Dallas, back when it wasn't as beautiful as today. Today, it also gives me great pleasure to announce publicly for the first time that he signed a video deal with Amazon. Part of the deal, he gets access to HBO and Prime, $12 a month. Talk about something that makes it worthwhile. So, yeah, thank you. That's why Amazon raised the prices. So, and I'll tell you, he was an extremely interesting gentleman. We sat and we had dinner last night, and I'm really looking forward to this. It's my great honor to introduce a man who shares his birthday with, you will not be able to put these 4 together in a room anytime soon, for many reasons. Elvis Presley, David Bowie, Stephen Hawking, and the new one, the live one, Kim Jong-un. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Yoram Solomon.
You know, one of the videos that I like the most is the TED Talk by Simon Sinek that ended up with the book Start With Why. And at some point in my career, I needed to understand my why. And so I want to tell you a story. Back in 2008, I was working on my PhD doctoral dissertation. And as I was working on that, I needed to find a topic. And I had this topic all nailed down. And I talked to my mentor. And my mentor, I have to thank him for a lot of what he did to me, because what he did really changed my career. And I came up with the topic. And typically in a university, when you're working on a PhD, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And you know what they call the person who passes the requirements for a dissertation by just a fraction? You know what they call that person? Doctor, exactly. So that's what you hear when you're in your PhD program. And as I was doing that, I gave him a topic that I thought I could handle. This was going to be pretty quickly. It's going to be quantitative. It's going to be a 110-page dissertation. I'm done. And he goes, I don't think that you're passionate enough about your topic. I want to see a topic that you're more passionate about. So he started pushing me and prodding me and poking me, and I'm starting to get pretty annoyed with him. And as I'm getting annoyed, he then asked me a pivotal question. He asked me, what pisses you off? And my immediate answer was going to be, well, right now, you. But at that time, this is after I started several startups back in Israel, one in Silicon Valley, sold a company in Silicon Valley, and I was working for Texas Instruments, a company with 35,000 employees, anything but a startup. And so what I said is, you know what really bugs me? Why are people so much more creative when they work in startups than when they work in mature companies? It was quite on the other side of the line. And after a few seconds, he said, I think we have a topic. For the next 2 years, this is what I researched. It was a global research. I went around the world, talked to people, interviewed people. 2 years. It took 2 years and 348 pages of a dissertation. And by the way, one professor here at UT Dallas was on my dissertation committee as a visiting scholar. And I found the answer. And after I found the answer, I had to defend the dissertation. The defense took about 89 minutes. Typical defenses take about 20 to 25. So I had friends asking me, why did it take 89 minutes? Well, if you know me, I like to talk. In fact, after about 65 minutes, they started saying, you know what, you're getting your doctoral degree today. Well, I still had a few things to say. So we were done in 89 minutes. We went to my ceremony. This would be a moment where you go, aww. Thank you very much for participating. This is my younger daughter, Shira. She was about 9 years old at the time. And we went to the ceremony. I got my doctoral degree. We came back home. This was in the summer of 2010. Came back home, and Shira had a play date, a friend that came over. And her friend asked her, Shira, where did you go this summer? And Shira said, we went to Minneapolis to my father's doctoral degree ceremony, graduation ceremony. And her friend said, oh, so your daddy's a doctor? And Shira thought about it for a second, and she said, yeah, but not the useful kind. So I'm not the useful kind. I'm a doctor of creativity. And that's what I research. I research why are people more creative, more innovative in startups rather than mature companies. And I found my passion as a result. And I decided that I truly believe that every company in the world, doesn't matter what size, doesn't matter how old, has the potential of being the most innovative company in the world. And that's when I started my practice. Now, if you want to implement innovations, there are certain tools that you're going to be using. There is design thinking, there is trees, there is scenario planning, there is war games, there are all kinds of tools. But you know something? They are tools. So I want to share with you one tools of my trade. In another short story, when I joined the Plano Chamber of Commerce a few years ago as a member, we had an orientation meeting, and the members started congratulating each other for becoming a member. And one of them came to me. He became a friend of mine, even after what I'm about to tell you. He gave me a business card. He's a photographer, and he said, my name is John. I'm a photographer, and I take great headshots if you ever need them. And I told him, really? So do I. And he said, are you a photographer? I said, no, I take great headshots. I served as a sniper. My headshots typically don't have a second take. And I wanted to show you my tools of the trade because I'm going to draw a few analogies from this. So this is an M110. An M110 fires 308 caliber ammunition. The ammunition you see here is it's a match grade ammunition. This is, instead of costing 60 cents per round, they cost $6 to $10 per round. They're very accurate, but they're just tools. And I want to show you why they're just tools. But first of all, I want to set this up and talk about 3 innovation killers that I found. The first one is you need to give employees time and space. You probably heard that Google gives their employees 1 day a week to be creative, right? 1 day a week, they go to the innovation lab just to be innovative. Have you all heard that? Yes, this is where you say yes. Thank you very much. They actually don't do that anymore. They stopped doing it because it doesn't work. Other companies have built innovation labs and structures and innovation hubs. Those don't work either. So I'll give you an example. When you think that you're going to throw money at the problem, research and development, anybody knows that person on the left? Can you recognize the person on the left? His name, what was it? Hemingway. Very good. Incorrect, though. His name is Samuel Piedmont Langley. You know what's named after him, right? Yeah, no, actually, this is called after another Langley. Samuel Huntington was, not Samuel Huntington, Samuel Langley. Samuel Huntington, that's a different story. Samuel Langley was the head of the Smithsonian Institute. And he received, in the late 1800s, a grant of $50,000, which in the late 1800s was a lot of money, from the Smithsonian Institute and the Department of Transportation to build the first manned, powered flying machine. And on December 8th of 1903, after the last crash, he gave up. Samuel Huntington, again I'm with Samuel Huntington, Samuel Langley had the best talent, access to the best talent. He had all the funds that he needed. He wasn't short on money, but he could not reach the goal. You can guess who the people on the right, on the left, the right, are. The Wright brothers, 9 days later, flew at Kitty Hawk, the first manned, powered flying device, machine, airplane. They did that on a $1,000 budget. So it's not really about money. I'm going to give you another example. Well, I'll get to the example later. But here's another thing. The second killer, innovation killer. If you want to innovate, innovate. Don't talk about innovation. And you know, when I wrote this, something came to mind.
I've been looking for you for 8 months. Whenever I should have had a gun in my right hand, I thought of you. Now I find you in exactly the position you put me. I had lots of time to learn how to shoot with my left. When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
If you have to innovate, innovate. Don't talk about innovation. Second one, you cannot force innovation. And here I'm going to draw an analogy from what I did. This is me. This is relatively recent. I served in the 35th Airborne Israeli Defense Forces. And this is what you need to consider when you shoot in 1,000 yards. If you want to hit a target at 1,000 yards, and let's say that you want to hit a head at 1,000 yards. If you are 4 inches off with this head, you're going to miss. Well, you think that you have the most powerful gun in the world, and you have the best ammunition in the world, and you can just force that bullet into that target. But you can't. One of the reasons, the smallest reason of them all, put aside wind, elevation, temperature, and humidity. The Earth is moving. if I'm trying to shoot and you're north or south of me, by the time the bullet makes the 1,000 yards, the earth has moved the target 8 inches to the left or the right. Those are the type of things that you need to consider. There are a lot of factors that affect the travel, the trajectory of that bullet. And now let's apply this to innovation. First of all, we use the words innovation and creativity interchangeably, but those are two different words. Innovation to me, creativity to me, is the idea that we have in our head. To me, it's the bullet. You have the bullet, you have the idea. Innovation, on the other hand, on the right side, is an organizational factor. This is the actual hitting of that target. And in between them is another organizational factor, and that's the implementation. This is a picture of a calculator, and this is what you calculate to make sure that that creative idea made it all the way to hit the bullseye on the target. So, I told you about my research, and in my research, the first thing that I wanted to know is, do people objectively experience higher levels of creativity in startups than mature companies? Because that's the first question you need to answer before you start asking yourself why. And the answer was yes, and the ratio was 6-to-1. For every one person who described that they felt more creative or were more creative in a mature company, there are 6 who reported that they were more creative in the startup. Now, every person who participated in my study had worked in both environments, so they were in a perfect position to compare the two environments. There are several different factors that affect this, and I wrote about them in one of my books, Unkill Creativity, How Corporate America Can Out-Innovate Startups. But it really boils down to there are 3 levels in the organization where creativity and innovation happen. There's the leadership level, there's the teamwork level, and there's the individual level. I'm going to talk about the first 2 today. First of all, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and this is not said by Peter Drucker first. He said it, but he wasn't the first. I have no idea who was. So I figured the only thing I can say is that it's not Peter Drucker. I want to tell you a story. Anybody familiar with USB? Raise your hand. Yes. You there in red, you're not familiar with USB. Somebody tell him. USB 3. Anybody know what the difference between USB 2 and USB 3? Faster, 10 times faster. You know, I'm not saying this to brag. Bragging is just going to be the icing on the cake. But a few weeks ago, I bought an external hard drive with my wife at Costco. And as I was standing there at Costco holding the box in my hand, I saw this big sign that says USB 3. And I told my wife, not too often in your life you get the opportunity to say, do you see that logo, USB 3? That would not have happened if it wasn't for me. And here's the story. I was working for Texas Instruments. I was the general manager. That's what brought me here to Dallas. I was the general manager of a $100 million consumer electronics connectivity business unit. And as part of it, I felt that my role is to know what's in the future. What's in the future of connectivity? We dealt with USB 2, FireWire, 1394, DVI, HDMI, all the wired connections. And one day I went to my boss and I told her that I want to be the strategist for the 3 business units. I don't want to run my own business unit. I want to be the strategist, the person that comes up with what's in the future. And I built this methodology that allowed me to forecast technology. And actually that methodology ended up being a class here, and that book was the textbook for this class that I taught in 2010 here in this university. But at that time, I started figuring out what's next, and I realized that hard disk drive capacity and flash card capacity is going to grow, and it's really growing exponentially by 42% every year. I found that the cost is going down, and content is going to be a lot richer than it was. Remember, this is in 2005. In 2005, there was no 4K TV yet. But 4K came out and then 8K came out. So content is becoming richer and richer. Files are becoming bigger and bigger. And I realized that the bottleneck is going to be the wire. Now, it's not that imagining USB 3 was such a stretch. But the thing is, with USB, everything starts and dies at Intel up in Hillsboro, Oregon. So I got on a plane, flew over to Hillsboro, Oregon, met with the USB people at Intel, and started convincing them that they needed to do USB 3. Surprisingly enough, they didn't want to. They wanted to do external serial ATA. We would have had an external serial ATA connector on our laptop. Do you want an external serial ATA connector on your laptop? You're welcome. So, 3 flights there, and I managed to convince them that this is what we needed to do. In fact, I believe that in the last meeting, it was Pat Gelsinger who kind of poked his head into the room and said, so what's the deal here? And I made the case for him again. People want backward compatibility. They want to make sure they can use their older devices. Devices are getting smaller. We don't want more connectors. It's going to be forever before you can give up on your USB 2 connector, so why not just do USB 3? And he said, that makes sense. Let's do it. So now they turned to me and they said, well, we don't have the resources to work on it. And I said, oh, don't worry, I got the resources. I had nothing. Remember, now I'm the strategist. I don't have 89 people reporting to me anymore. But I thought that's not going to be a big deal. So I went back home and I talked to my boss and I told her, we need to do USB 3. I need this guy, and that lady. We need the 3 of them because they're the ones who can put this together. And she said, well, I can't allocate the resources without an approval of our senior VP. Why? I mean, it's just 3 engineers. And she said, no, we need the senior VP. So I asked her, can we have a meeting with the senior VP? She said, yes. And she went to schedule that meeting. An hour later, she called me and she said, we have a meeting scheduled. I said, great. When's the meeting? It is 9 now. What time is the meeting? Well, the meeting is at 11 on September 5th. But we're in July now. We can't wait until September 5th. And she said, that's the first opening he has on his calendar. And I asked her, do you mind if I go? It sounds like this resonates with some of you. Do you mind if I go try to schedule another appointment and maybe earlier? And she said, well, be my guest. So I went to his office. He has this suite. And his door was kind of cracked open. And so I looked inside. I saw that he was there. There was nobody else there. He seemed to be on his computer. I asked his assistant, is he on the phone? She looked at her phone and she said, no, he's not on the phone. So I walked straight into his office. She jumped to stop me. But the thing is, she had to go all around the reception desk. And there was no way she was going to make it before I do. So I went to the door, I knocked, got my head through the door, I asked him, can we have a meeting about USB 3? And he said, we scheduled something, didn't we? I said, yes, it's September 5th, it's 6 weeks from now. Can't we have it earlier? And he looked at his calendar, he said, no, I'm pretty booked and I'm traveling, I can't do anything before September 5th. Let's do it September 5th. And I asked him, how about tomorrow? So he looked at his calendar again. He said, well, I'm booked 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and I really have to go at 8 p.m. He said, how about 7 a.m.? So he looked at me and he said, well, if you're going to be here at 7, I'll be here at 7. So we had a meeting the next day at 7 a.m. I showed him the business plan. This was a business plan for $533 million over the next 3 years. He looked at it and he asked only one question. Do we have a customer asking for it? No. They don't know that somebody is even thinking about it yet. So why would they ask for it? He said, come back when you have a customer. I went home and I decided to resign, to leave the company, leave Texas Instruments. But I have a rule. Never write your resignation letter in the evening. Always write it in the morning when you're fresh and creative and you can really write a good resignation letter. So I went to sleep, I got up in the morning, but instead of writing my resignation letter, I decided I'm going to be doing something else. I'm going to be doing USB 3. So I went to the 3 engineers that I mentioned before and I told them, you know, I really need you to be part of this USB 3 team. We need to build this prototype. We need to show it to Intel. And they said, you don't have to convince us. Talk to our boss. If she tells us to work on it, we'll work on it. And I said, well, here's the deal, which is never a good statement to start with. Here is the deal. I talked to her. She asked that we get permission from our senior VP. So they said, go get a permission from the senior VP. I said, I went. They said, then we're fine. I said, no. He said, no. So what do? I told him, look, I need you to work on this. This is where the future is going to be. There's going to be a USB 3. We can be the first ones or we can be the last ones like we were with some of the other things. How about if we're going to be the first ones? But here's the deal. I need you to work on this. I need you to not tell anyone, because if you tell anyone, you're going to get in trouble and I can't help you. You can't do that at the expense of your day job, because nobody knows that you're going to be working on it. Little did I know that to the engineers, this was a value proposition. They wanted to get in trouble. Long story short, 3 weeks later, we flew over to Hillsboro, Oregon with a very crude prototype, but we proved to Intel that we could run USB 3 at 5 gigabit per second over a 14-foot USB cable. And as they say, the rest is history. There are 4 billion USB 3 ports shipped every year now. So what happened there? Why did I have to go through this? And it goes back to the word culture. And I have a few dictionary definitions to the word culture, but you can see that the words that I emphasized are words such as people, attitudes towards each other, group, shared by people, shared institution or organization. It's about people. Culture is about people. And here's something that happens to companies, which I found in my research. Companies start as startups having a very strong culture of innovation. They better, because otherwise they're not going to make it. They have to have a great new idea. So they start there, they have to cross that line of viability, but over time, as they grow, and growing means bigger size, bigger revenue, more revenue, maturity, years, they lose this culture. And here's the problem. Once they cross this point of no return, not only that they lose this culture, but they start losing their market share because their products are no longer the best products. They're doing the same thing that their competitors are doing. Margins are starting to shrink. Profits are shrinking. And guess what? Expenses are not. So we're starting to lose money, and as we lose money, what do? Do we try to be more innovative? No, we cut costs. And it doesn't take long before when you cut costs, you start cutting out the liver and the heart and the lungs and the kidneys, and you got nothing. And you cross that line of viability in the wrong direction, and that's when you end. So I decided, since we like policies, right? I decided to write an innovation policy manual, and throughout this presentation, I'm going to give you parts from it. Let's start with, I look at innovation as a 6-layer building. And at the top building is company performance. We care about company performance. A company has to excel in innovation, execution, and marketing. Drucker said that the company was built to only for 2 purposes, innovation and marketing, but I think that execution needs to be there too. So we want to excel in innovation, execution, and marketing. Do we agree? The reason is because innovative companies, research showed, would have 6 times the market share, 6 times the revenue, 3 times the profits, and do 50% better during recessions than the average company. It also shows that if you normalize the profitability of an innovative company with the average company for year 1, by year 5, the innovative company will have 5 times the profit. So there's a good reason why you want to be an innovative company. Another research showed, more recent, showed that the rate of ideas, which is the number of ideas generated by the company divided by the number of employees, whether you multiply it by 1,000 or not, it's just a matter of convenience, there is a positive, statistically significant relationship between the ideation rate and profitability growth. And in fact, if you look at the smaller numbers, the red line, you will see that that relationship is even stronger. So you have a lot of ideas. You have to have a lot of ideas. There's another research that showed that for every one successful market launch of a product, service, process, or business model, you must have 3,000 ideas, which means there's 1 good idea and 2,999 bad ones. It's a numbers game. You have to have a lot of ideas, which means you have to support creativity. But in this case, let's write policy 1, and policy 1 says that the company must be innovative more than 80% of the time, the company shall excel in execution, and the company will gain the highest market share. Can we write this policy? the answer is yes, we can write this policy. But it's not going to be worth the paper it's written on. You got to give yourself more what you can do. So let's go to the second layer. In order for us to have an innovative, highly execution-oriented and market-oriented company, we must have strong leadership and teamwork. Actually, leadership, followership, and teamwork. So first of all, let's put you in the map of the organization. In the organization, you will have at least one of those three relationships. You are a leader, you lead people. You are a follower, you follow a leader. And you are a team member, you have teamwork with your peers. If you don't have any of those three, I have news for you, you're not working for that organization. Check your bank account, you're probably not getting a salary either. So those are the three elements. Now, in order for the company to get the performance that you want to get, leadership, followership, and teamwork must be effective, productive, and creative. I like the image on the left, on the right. This is a SEAL team. That's effective, productive, and creative leadership and teamwork. So let's write policy number 2. Policy number 2 for the second layer says that leadership must be effective, productive, and creative, and so does teamwork. Can we write this policy? Yes, there you go, you're catching along. We can write this policy. Once again, this policy is not worth the paper it's written on. Let's go a level below. Interactions. The type of interactions that can make leadership or teamwork effective, productive, and creative. On the leadership and followership side, you need to give your employees autonomy. And I'll talk more about autonomy. In response, what your employees will do is they will give you ownership. They will show ownership and they will show accountability. The flip side of it is you can put bureaucracy in their way, and what you will get in response is CYA. They're going to cover their asses. Nothing more than that. This is something that I wrote about in my almost latest book. I like the definition of Teresa Amabile. If you know her, she is a professor for now business, used to be psychology in Harvard, where she said creativity thrives when managers let people decide how to climb a mountain, but they don't need to choose which mountain to climb. You know, when we go all the way to the other extreme and we let employees think about whatever they want to do and be creative in whatever area, no, I'm sorry. This is the mountain that we need to climb. Let's agree that this is the mountain, but then I'll let you decide how. I like quotes from this other person too. Bureaucracy is the overuse of process, policy, and formalization to gain power and or replace individual common sense. And that's what we do with policies. Then we have teamwork. In order for us to have effective, productive, and creative teamwork, we must be able to conduct constructive conflict, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the alternative to this is we're going to have office politics. So let's start with constructive conflict. In case you don't realize, these are bagels, which means it's time for a story. One day I was going to an Einstein Brothers. That's why the bagels. I went to an Einstein Brothers, and as I was sitting there, I noticed that near the window, there were two gentlemen that were arguing. And they were arguing pretty loud, but they were also arguing in Hebrew. And this was here in Plano. So they were arguing in Hebrew, and they started raising their voices and raising their voices and raising their voices. And at some point, people around them started creating this demilitarized zone around them. And everybody started going away. Nobody would tell them to shut up, but they would just go away. But I understood everything that they said. This was not personal. This was not emotional. They were passionate about what they're doing. This was about professional things. This was about what they're doing at their job. And they were really passionate about this. But I bet that at the end of this conversation, they went and grabbed a beer maybe or something else, but they remained friends. That is constructive conflict. Of course, the flip side, here's a quote that I like. This is even a better person than the previous one I quoted. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. That, to me, is the definition of constructive conflict. We don't have to agree. Patrick Lencioni gave a definition of what office politics is. And politics is really when people choose their words and actions based on how they want others to react rather than based on what they really think. This is when we have the meeting before the meeting after the meeting. We just don't have the meeting during the meeting. Does that ever happen? It does. And here's what happened to those 4 factors of interaction. As the company starts declining, autonomy goes down because the company is too big. We can't just give autonomy to people, and we have too much resources. What will they do with this autonomy? So instead, what we do is we build processes and policies, and we're very formal in how we do things, because this is how we can control the company. At the same time, our ability to conduct constructive conflict goes down because, we have a lot of churn in the company. People come in and out of our organizations, of our teams. And what does happen is we start having office politics. We have competition. We're trying to compete over pay raises. We're trying to compete over promotions. So let's write policy number 3. Policy number 3, leaders must give followers autonomy. Leaders must reduce bureaucracy, which is kind of an oxymoron having it on a policy. Leaders must inspire their followers. Followers must be inspired by their leaders. Followers might take ownership. Followers should not exhibit CYA behavior. Team members must use constructive conflict and should not engage in office politics. Can we write this policy? Yes. Is it worth the paper it's written on? We just wasted the 3rd piece of paper. Let's go a level below. Behaviors. What kind of behaviors? On the left side, what the leader does, the leader needs to shield his or her organization. Yeah, I guess I need to tell another story. So this happened about 3-4 years ago. 3-4 years ago, my older daughter, was a gymnast. Now she's a gymnastics coach. And she had a friend where she was practicing gymnastics, and I saw the friend's father once in a meet, and I sat down with him, didn't know him, didn't know the company. You may have heard of the company, Alliance Data. He was working for Alliance Data, large software company, $6 billion, probably more now. And but he was wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. I didn't know. The only thing I knew is that he was Megan's dad. So I sat down next to him. I asked him. I introduced myself. Hi, my name is Yoram Solomon. I'm Maya's dad. You're Megan's dad, right? He said, yes. I'm Ed Heffernan. And so I asked him, what company do you work for? And he said, Alliance Data. Didn't know Alliance Data. Didn't know the size of Alliance Data at the time. And I asked him, what do you do? And he said, I'm the head cheerleader. So I thought about this for a second, and I said, so are you the CEO? And he said, yes, I am. But he represented himself as the head cheerleader. Now, I didn't think much of it at the time. So a few months later, I was sitting in an executive staff meeting where the CEO of another company was berating, yelling at his executive staff. This is a public technology company, and he was just yelling at them, you're disappointing me, you're not doing what I tell you. From this moment on, you're going to do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it, and exactly how I say it. After that meeting was over, I went to his office and I asked him, why did you do that? You demotivated all of your executive staff. Nobody here wants to work anymore. I mean, they're depressed now. Why did you do that? And he said another statement I will never forget. He said, because I'm the CEO, I'm not a goddamn cheerleader. Here's that word again. And at that time, I wrote an article for Inc. magazine that was titled, One Word that Distinguishes the Best CEOs from the Worst CEOs. And I started doing research for that article, and what I found was that, amazingly enough, Frank, just like we found yesterday that we live within walking distance from one another, and your daughter's friend is a police officer that I rode with, we had a lot in common. I also found that they too had a lot in common. They took office as CEOs of their respective companies, technology companies, public companies, within 6 months of one another 11 years ago. They both took a public company with a share price around $14. That was amazing. Ed Heffernan took his company in the next 11 years from $14 to $250. His company, the last 5 years, has been one of the top 100 companies to work for in the DFW area. The other CEO took his company from a stock price of $14 all the way to bankruptcy. One word that separates the best CEOs from the worst CEOs, the best leaders from the worst leaders. A best leader is someone who shields his organization. It's the organization in response is willing to take risks because they know that this stays here. On the teamwork side, in order for us to conduct this constructive conflict that I talked about, you must be able to be vulnerable with me. You must be able to ask stupid questions. Now, if you ask stupid questions, what am I going to say? Here's how it starts. It starts with, you're going to say, can I ask a stupid question? My answer would be, there are no stupid questions. No, yes, there are. 80% of my questions are stupid. But here's the thing. If I'm willing to be vulnerable with you, I'm going to ask stupid questions. And I expect you to give me direct, unsweetened feedback. And you expect me to be receptive to that feedback and not take it personally and not become emotional. Those are the 3 ingredients of behavior that would lead us to be able to conduct constructive conflict. Let's write a policy for that. I'm just going to skip that. Can I write this policy? The answer is yes. Is it worth the paper it's written on? No, we just wasted the 4th piece of paper. The one thing that would allow us to do all those things is trust. Trust is the foundation of this building that ends with a company performance, with a company being innovative, excels in execution and in marketing. Trust is the one piece of the puzzle that joins everything. Stephen Covey Jr. wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. Some of his quotes that I like is, high trust organizations had a total shareholder return, which is the stock price plus dividends, 286% higher than low trust organizations. That's 4 times almost. He also said that the 100 best companies to work for, where 60% of the factors is considered trust, delivered 4 times the return in broad market in the previous 7 years before he wrote that book. There are other benefits. Paul Zak described the benefits as 74% less less stress, 106% more energy, 29% more satisfaction, 40% less burnout. This is on the personal level. On the organizational level, would you like to have 50% higher productivity because you have a trust-based organization? 76% more engagement? How do you build trust? I mean, I can just tell you now, let's write policy 5 and say leaders must trust their followers, followers must trust their leaders, and team members must trust each other. Can I write this? Yes. Is it worth the paper it's on? No. 5 pieces went away. I call it trust actions. I did trademark it. And trust actions are the piers that hold the foundation. The reason I know about piers, if you live in North Texas, you have to know about piers because you have foundation problems. And if you don't have foundation problems, I have good news for you, you will have foundation problems. And that's where you start putting piers. I think I have 15 or something piers under my house now. But those are the things that hold that foundation called trust. And those are made of 2 different parts. On the left side, you can see the structural part. And on the right side, you can see the transactional side. The structural side, for me to trust you, I need to first feel that you are competent, professionally competent in what you do. If I don't think that you're competent in what you do, I don't think we're going to develop trust. Second part is shared values. Do we share values? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about being Republican or Democrat or anything. By the way, I do think that 95% of us here in this room voted in the last presidential election the same way. Yes, 95% of us voted the same way in the last presidential election. We voted for one candidate so that the other one doesn't make it to the White House. So, I guess here it's more than 5% on the other side. We have to have shared values. It doesn't have to be Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, but do you come to meetings on time? Do you like coming on time? How many of you are really particular in, if the meeting starts at 8:30, I'll be here at 8:30 or before? How many of you think it's not such a big deal? You know what? Who's right? We both are. But the thing is, we will not be able to build trust if one of us thinks that we need to show up to the meeting at 8:30 and the other says, 20 minutes, I was only 20 minutes late. How big a deal is this? And by the way, that other person is pretty upset with you getting upset over them being late. Shared values. If we don't share values, we will not be able to build trust. We must share values. Symmetry or fairness of our relationship. When you are in a team with your boss, there is a problem. When you're in a team with someone who makes twice as much as you do, even though you think that your contribution is pretty much equal, that's a problem. If you have a marketing person making $200,000 and you're an engineer making $120,000, you're sitting in the same meeting, developing the same product, you don't think that your job is less important than this other person, than the marketing person, right? But you do resent the fact that they're making 200 when you're making 120. Fairness and symmetry play a big role in building trust. And then we have the transactional element. The transactional element, every interaction that we have. Today, we are having an interaction here today. It's kind of a one-way interaction for the most part, but we are having an interaction. And there are three things that affect how this interaction builds trust. The first one is how much time do we spend together. The second is the intensity of that interaction, and I'll talk more about intensity. And the third one is the positivity of how we see each other in this interaction. And the bad news I have for you is that the ratio, called the Losada ratio, between how we respond to negative positivity versus positive positivity is 3-to-1. Actually, it's 2.9013 to 1. For every one negative event, we need 3 positive events to just balance it out. I want to show you a formula. I actually developed a formula. I'm not kidding, this is real. I know I have a sense of humor, but this is real. There's a lot of work that went into this one. And this is the formula for building trust. Don't expect you to remember this. I told you that on the left side we have the structural elements, the right side we have the transactional elements, and I mentioned that I'm going to focus on one of them, and I want to give you a tip. This is one of the most powerful tips in building trust in organization. The I, the intensity of an interaction. And to explain the intensity of the interaction, I'm going to show you a video, and here's what I'm going to ask you. This is a video that was taken in 1944, was created in 1944. So it wasn't created as video initially. I want you to tell me what is happening there. Here it is. I want you to think about emotions that you see there. I want you to think about positivity and negativity. What's happening there? What do you think the circle is feeling right now? Fear. What? Yeah. Okay. Who's the good person there? Who? The triangle, the smaller triangle or a bigger one? Smaller. What do you think about the bigger triangle? It was mean? Yeah. What was this circle feeling? Unsafe. The circle was feeling unsafe. Okay, so let me clarify this. These are three geometric shapes. They have no feelings. They have no character. You projected character. You projected feeling. You projected interactions. You projected emotions on shapes. There was no words. There was no sound to this video. This is the importance of being able to look at the other person. Now, I'm going to talk about the 73855 rule in a second, but one of the ways to have an interaction, thank God for video conferencing, right? In video conferencing, you can see the other person, you can see their emotions, and they do have emotions. Except that one problem. This is what you're being promised. This is taken from a video conferencing commercial. This person is looking me straight in the eyes, right? I can see what you're thinking. This is what it really looks like. You get a person looking at your belly button or other parts. It doesn't make you feel comfortable. Doesn't help you build trust. So really, I'll talk about the 73855 rule. This was created by Professor Albert Mehrabian back in UCLA, I believe, published in his first book, Silent Messages, in 1971. And what he said was that 7% of what we convey, communicate, or our feelings is conveyed through words, 7%, 38% through tone of voice, and 55% through body language. He actually called it facial expressions. And if you don't remember what they are, just remember the acronym words, tone, face. Exactly, yes. So, in order to have stronger interactions, we cannot just use words. Don't use email. Phone calls, that's voice plus, that's words plus tone. That's 45%. Have a face-to-face meeting. By the way, there are things that are even more powerful than the 100% of face-to-face meeting, and those are team building activities. Being in a project that puts you under a lot of stress, that builds a lot of camaraderie, that builds a lot of trust. Touch. Paul Zak replied or explained that when you shake hands or when you hug, you release oxytocin, and as it turns out, oxytocin builds trust and trustworthiness. And of course, eventually you have life-altering events. Back to my service, there is nothing like the trust when you are in a small elite force and you have your back to somebody else and you know that they have your back. You're trusting your life in their hands, and you know that if somebody's shooting from behind, that person would rather take the bullet than let you take one. And that person behind you knows that you're going to do exactly the same things for them. And there's something to be learned from how military works. Okay, finally, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Once again, Peter Drucker, he did say this one. And for that, you have your own app, I have my app. I started developing an app with my team, and what we do is we are tracking how trust is being developed in an organization. This is an app that you can have in your phone, and as you get this app, you can report on every interaction, you can add people to your team, you can say what you feel about them. They don't know that that's what you said, but you have an opportunity to see how your own trustworthiness is built as a team member, as a leader, and as a follower, and you can see how well your team is doing. And the most important thing is it gives you alerts to what you can do to fix things. I'm going to give you a few other ideas other than get your butt out of your chair and go talk to the other person face to face rather than try and send an email. That would be the best one. But when you have a meeting, have ground rules. And I like the compass here. Nothing is personal. We are all equal. What happens here stays here, and everything is on the table. Several things that you need to say in order to have productive meetings. Say, I don't know. Try and do that with me. Say, I don't know. It was kind of hard, right? The second one is say, I was wrong. That's even harder. And by the way, there is an advanced level here where you can say, I was wrong and you were right. That's even more painful. What do we have in common? Try and find what we have in common. You know, when we sat at dinner yesterday, Frank and I found that we almost share a wife. And we had a lot in common. And you know what? We look at each other differently today after what we found yesterday. Do that with team members. Do that with your boss. Do that with your employees. Stop saying next time ask first. If one of your employees comes to you and says, I tried something without your permission and failed, don't say next time ask first. Don't say next time don't do that again. Don't say this is not how we do things around here. Don't say there is no such thing as a stupid question or a stupid idea. And you know, one of the ones I hate the most is let's agree to disagree. No, let's disagree. Let's talk about this. When we say let's agree to disagree, we're trying to stop this conversation. Don't stop it. Let's get to the bottom of it. I'm going to skip the individual creativity. Building trust in a leadership team is really the most important part, more than any other team in the organization. You get the biggest bang for the buck, and for two reasons. One is the leadership team controls the most amount of resources. Trust and inspiration flows downwards to the organization. If you have a leadership team with high trust, this flows down to the organization. However, there's, and before I go with the however, policy 6. First of all, ignore policies 1 through 5. I'm sorry, this was supposed to be 5, because there is no way to enforce them. Don't work with incompetent people. I know, it sounds outrageous. Don't work with incompetent people. Let them know that that's what you feel. Let them either improve myself or work with other people, because you're not going to trust them ever if they're incompetent professionally in what they do. Be good at what you do. Don't let other people think that you're incompetent. Pay attention to being the best you can professionally. If you can't build trust, stop trying. Seriously. If it's not building, and I'm giving you the building blocks, if the building blocks or one of the building blocks is not there, stop trying. It's not going to happen. Accept that it's not going to happen. Either change teams or accept that you're not going to have trust and not going to be as effective as you can. Get your butt out of your chair. Go have face-to-face meetings. Set meeting ground rules, as I mentioned before. Give trust a head start. You know, sometimes some people would start by not trusting you and you have to earn your trust. Some people would start, I am a person that would start by trusting you and the trust is yours to lose. Try and be more on that side. That's a personal decision you make. And engage in team building activities, especially those that build trust. Now, doing this is not an easy job, especially when you're trying to do that with a leadership team. And I've done that with leadership teams. It's not an easy task. When you're trying to get a leadership team together and work on trust, sometimes it feels like this.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family. Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs. That's another thing altogether. Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, it's... I'm living the dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost to one of them, ain't feeling like it in the world.
UDS, managing the complexities of the digital economy.
You have a great summit today. I saw the talks that you're going to have. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for listening.
All right, he's got his books for sale out of the main lobby where you all checked in. Please stop by and see him.